All right.
We're going to just do this. So first of all, thank you everyone for your patience again as we got this started. And oh, we've got someone from the UK. I love we have a very international crowd. That's awesome. So hello and welcome to this Tilt Together Facebook Live. And for those of you who don't know me, we have so many new people in the group. My name is Debbie Reber. I'm the founder of Tilt Parenting. I have the Tilt Parenting podcast, and I'm the author of the book Differently Wired and the wrangler of this community, this awesome community. And I'm really excited today to have Adrianne Meldrum joining me, and I want to read her fancy bio. And actually, I'm coming from Brooklyn. We asked where everyone else is coming from. And Adrianne, you want to say where you're here joining us from?
Yeah, I'm tuning in from sunny and hot Mesa, Arizona.
Very nice. And dry heat though, right?
Dry heat. It's the only kind of heat that's accessible.
Yeah. Excellent. Awesome. All right. So you guys listen to Adrianne's bio here. Adrianne Meldrum is the founder and owner of Made for Math, an all-online math center focused on serving students with the gifts, love it, the gifts of dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. She's a certified teacher and has been coaching students since 2006. She received multisensory math training from Marilyn Zecker and also received 2E and gifted education from Bridges Academy. Adrianne has seen up close how using multisensory math techniques with her students leads to more confidence, higher grades, but also a rooted understanding of how math works. Her goal is to bring multisensory math to as many struggling students as possible. So, anything that isn't in your formal bio that you want us to know before we jump in?
So that sentiment about the gifts of dyslexia, ADHD, and autism, I wholeheartedly believe that. I'm not just saying that. We need thinkers that are very different and valued in our world. I think you mentioned you were the other day, and we were watching as a family an episode of Nova about gene alteration, and they were talking about making super babies and deleting things that were unwanted. And I thought, that is awful. That's a terrible idea, because I know we need these kids that are wired differently. They are part of the human progression. They are who moves our race forward. And I was telling my kids, no. Like, no, I don't want to delete character traits. I don't want to do any of that. I think that's a terrible idea. So I'm not just blowing steam when I say that. I wholeheartedly believe we need different thinkers in this world. And there is no deficits really like that. I view them as such awesome people, and they're so much fun to be around. I really enjoy them. And really, anyone can learn math if it's taught to them the right way.
Awesome. Yes. And so, you're in the right place, because obviously that is a foundational tenet of Tilt Parenting, is this idea that these are the kids that we need. They have so many gifts. It's such a strengths-based perspective of teaching and parenting and just embracing who these kids are. So I love that. Thank you for adding that.
You're welcome.
So, before we get into, I've got questions. Some of you have shared questions in advance. I've got some questions. Before I get to that, I also just want to make sure you guys know that Adrianne's company, Made for Math, works one-on-one, hands-on with kids who are struggling with math, and she has made a special offer for our community that members of the Tilt community, if they use the code TILT, and I'll post this below, the link below in this thread, that we can get a discount on an in-depth assessment. And that's the way that Made for Math kind of figures out exactly what kind of math support would work best for your child. So thank you for that. That's very generous.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think is unique is that many education supports are looking at deficits. With our in-depth assessment, it's different in that, yes, there may be a deficit, but we're looking for the strengths that are there inside, and we use those strengths to build the weakness. And so, for example, we do assessments that tell us, is your kid good at visual spatial thinking? Are they excellent at procedural, which most of them are not actually, or Do they have really high verbal skills? And so we can use some of these strengths to build the weaknesses, which is fundamentally different from how a lot of people approach educating a twice exceptional child.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And we also know that there's no one size fits all for differently wired kids, which is what makes them so awesomely complicated. But
Yes.
so that's great. So what I would love to just start with is just tell us kind of why this matters. Like math is one of those subjects that it's really critical, right? That certain skills are developed in order to build, and like what's at stake if kids kind of fall behind when they're acquiring math skills?
There's a lot at stake. That's a great question. Personally, I think Seth has used this phrase, I'm a wounded healer. So as a child, I struggled with math. I resorted to cheating. I'm going to be honest, because I could not do what they were asking. You know, I would earn gold stars for earning my math facts, and I couldn't do it. And so I cheated with my friend. And I vividly remember that and felt a lot of shame about that I could not learn the math facts the way they were teaching them at school. But by the time I reached middle school, I had some teachers who took a vested interest in me. They really helped me. He understood I needed to be closer to the front of the room, that I needed someone to come and like point things out and help me see the connections. He took that time, and I went from feeling invisible to feeling seen, heard, and appreciated for what I could do. And that totally set me on another path. And math ended up changing from an utter weakness to a strength for me, and it spilled over into other subjects. The fascinating thing is our work, we find the same to be true. We get kids that are 2 to 5 grade levels behind, and we get them caught up to what their peers are doing, and suddenly these kids are walking around going, I can do math. It turns out I can learn just about anything, because it was such a big hurdle. They learned how to learn and how their brain operates, and so it spills over into other subjects for them, which is really important for them to learn and understand, right? I think there's a lot of adults watching that have anxiety about math. And again, if you could learn it in a way that makes sense to your brain, I think you would find it spills over into other areas of your life. Things that brought you anxiety don't as much anymore, because you have some tools now and some knowledge about how your brain works. And it's not a matter of I can't, it's like I can with the right tools, with the right help. So that's really important. As far as what's at stake, sadly, a lot of these kids will struggle to even get into college. There's a barrier to entry with college, and it's Algebra 1 skills. If you don't have that, you're going to be in remedial math at the college level and paying for classes that do not count towards graduation. Sadly, that's just the truth. And I think there's a lot of parents in here that have that vision for their child. They want them to go to college, but that math is going to prevent them from moving forward and graduating, you know, with the degree at hand. And so that's a common barrier, and one that we in education are worried about and stressed about, and we want to help these students. And so even older students come and work with us to get these skills so they can pass those classes, because they have so much damage that was done when they were younger. And then the math skills, the analytical thinking that comes with math, is so important in our modern society. We need the kids who are analytical thinkers, who can identify a pattern, even if it's not a numeric pattern. If they can watch human behavior and say, oh, I see a pattern there, those skills are rooted in math. And if they can learn to apply that to mathematics, there's so many more jobs that will be open to them in the future. Math is a really important skill for us to have as adults. It would be hard to run a business if you struggled with your math. It would be hard to do your finances, right? Even telling time is a huge one. We've got lots of kids who can't do that. And if they don't understand time, they can't manage their time. So math is a crucial core topic to spend time on. It's one to invest in. Now, a question I get a lot from parents when they've got a kid who's struggling with math, struggling with reading, struggling, you know, the list keeps going. There's a prioritization that has to happen. If reading and math are an issue, I would say pick reading. focus on that, then do the math. You don't want to do both at the same time. Our kids they just get overwhelmed. They're going to shut down. It's too much. And so take the time, prioritize what's the biggest pain point, and focus on those skills first, and then move forward.
Awesome. Awesome. So how do we know if our kids are struggling? I mean, as I ask that question, I'm like, sometimes it's really obvious, you know, but how do we know if it's just, if it's truly a math fluency issue, or a lagging skill, or if it's related to executive functioning issues, or organization, or otherwise?
Sure. So an easy way to pinpoint that is, let's say you're trying to figure out if your kid understands long division, and it seems like it's all just a hot mess, and it's difficult to know, is it fluency, is it procedure? How you're going to pinpoint that is you can use problems that have math facts they know. So if you know your child knows his threes inside and out, you give them a problem that only uses the threes and watch them solve it. And then you'll see, oh, they don't have this procedure down. Oh, they're forgetting to pull down a number or move the decimal if we're doing decimal operations. That's one way that you could pinpoint it. Another way you could pinpoint it is give them a narrow set of math facts as a near point reference, not an entire sheet. So an entire sheet of math facts of all of them, too much. It takes too much for a kid to line it up and go, boop. That takes too much brain power. So if the problem is the nines, for example, you would have the nines times table written out across the top of the page. They can look at it and use it, and that will help you narrow in, is this a fluency issue, or is this, I can't do the procedure of what's happening? Usually it's the procedure. One thing that I think surprises a lot of our students is it can be one way or the other. It's the fluency is an issue, but they've got the procedure. Our high school students are always surprised, like, oh my gosh, I know how to do this. If I use the right numbers, I can do this. But the younger kids, it can be opposite. It's the fluency is an issue and the procedure is an issue. So I totally love that question, because it's kind of a teasing it out and seeing what the issues are. And that is the easiest way to separate it, no matter what topic you're working on.
Are there kinds of math challenges that are typical for atypical kids?
Yes. I have a huge list, actually, but I'm going to share with your crowd. If you're curious about math, get this book. I know this is backwards. Mathematics for Dyslexics and Dyscalculics. Excellent. Common issues. I was just going to read them straight from here, because it reads like a Bible, and this is everything I know to be true. Common issues are directionality. So math is frustrating because it's not like reading, where we're reading top to bottom, left to right. Sometimes we're starting at the right and we're working to the left. Sometimes we're starting at the bottom and we're going to the top. So that is frustrating for our twice exceptional students, because it doesn't follow a pattern that they can easily see and relate to. It's too much to remember. So the directionality is a common pain point for our students. Sequencing is an issue. So putting things in order, one-to-one correspondence. So think about this. When your child's doing counting bears and they're pulling it out and saying 1, 2, 3, that skill builds in the future in secondary math. That is graphing. They have to be able to put the pencil down on the paper and count those lines and say 1, 2, and we can see usually our high school students are doing this. They're kind of hovering. They're not really sure where to go. And that means they have a weakness in that one-to-one correspondence. And so how we fix that is magnets on a board to give them that sensory input. If I'm touching it, I'm counting it, that kind of stuff. So sequencing is a huge issue. Visual difficulties. So this is like symbol confusion. If you look at our logo on our website, it's actually a blend of all 4 operations. The 4 operations visually look very similar. Division kind of looks like addition, right? Multiplication kind of looks like addition. It's just rotated slightly. So these kinds of errors cause problems for our students. If we think about subtraction, it can look like a negative. So that can cause errors, especially for our kids that conceptually they get math. And so they rush and they make lots of errors because they're not visually tracking what's really happening. And so it's important for students to learn to slow down, circle the things that the parts that are helpful, what operation am I doing, that kind of stuff. And if you've got ADHD, slowing down is like not your favorite thing. Other common issues for our twice exceptional kids is the working memory and the long-term memory. Those two can be problematic. If, for example, your child had a hard time learning math facts and you've taught them using times tales, which is a story-based format, it can really hurt our kids in the long run because the story's so long that it takes up too much room in their working memory. So by the time they're trying to work through the procedures and hold that story, it becomes too much for them. And so it's important that we focus on how we're storing information long term so that when it's pulled into that working memory, it's quick, it's accessible, it's more automatic. And those are issues. Rote learning is usually ineffective. Flashcards, drill and kill, doesn't work for our kids. Just doesn't. So we have to give them as many sensory experiences possible so that they can store it in a way that makes sense to the brain, that they can go and find it. So those are issues. And then the processing speed, another huge hurdle for our students. Seriously, we have to practice as a team not to say the question again. We're counting really slow in our head before we ask if they need clarity on what I just asked, because we do have a lot of students have very slow working memory or processing speed, but they can do the problem if given the time. So that's really important. Last thing is language. The language of math is hard, especially for a kid with dyslexia. So we spend a lot of time with word study and mathematics, and that helps them tie it, solidify it, and understand what we're working on. And so those are some of the common issues that our students have.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of those are very familiar to people watching this. And, just, with the flashcards, like, oh gosh, I remember those days. And, I think there is so much pressure on parents to, you have to know your math facts. And, when my son was younger and I was homeschooling him, I was like, here are the math facts. Like, you don't need to memorize. Like, I just was like, I'm not going to prioritize memorization of these. But what are some, we've gotten some questions about that fluency piece. Do you have any strategies or things that you would like parents to be aware of that can help develop that fluency?
Yes. One thing to note with math facts and fluency, for some students, they will never be fluent, and it's something you need to just accept. It's not a hill to die on. But they are important to build, yes. So I'm not saying give up if it's just been hard, but if let's say you use some of the methods I'm going to share with you, and that's still not working, then maybe decide not to stress too much about it and look for that calculator accommodation. But when we're teaching math facts, we need them to be highly visual and hands-on. And because I just recently moved, I don't have some of my manipulatives here. So what I'll do is after this Facebook Live, I'll drop some pictures so people can see what I'm talking about. But one way that we teach math facts is using a string with some beads on it, and they're in the groups. So if we were teaching the nines, they would have 9 sets or 10 sets of 9 on the string in alternating colors. And this is really important for our students to see the quantity building and getting bigger, because that is an abstract idea if you think about it. Multiplication is a more efficient way to add, and so they can see it building and getting bigger. And what we do is we touch and count them. And so that manipulative can be really helpful. Just use pony beads and practice counting by 9s. And so that's skip counting, right? But what they're doing is they're grabbing it and sliding it to the right and counting that quantity out loud. And then you're going to narrow how many math facts you're working on at a time. So we're not going to learn all of the 9s table. We're going to learn 9 times 1, 2, and 3, and stop right there and work on those. And how you're working on those is you're using the strings, but in your work at home, you could be learning other topics. I mentioned long division, for example. Keep that string out and use only problems that involve up to that 9 times 3. And the students can use that as a near point reference for them to see the math fact families. Then you do that for about a week, then add another 1 or 2, and add another 1 or 2 until you get all the way up to 9 times 10. And then the students can start practicing them all together for a couple weeks. That is huge for our students to be able to learn the math facts and use them simultaneously in their practice at home. It gives the math fact practice purpose. And that is huge. I think all of us can relate. Twice exceptional kids, if they sense meaningless, their buy-in goes way down and they're not interested in learning this.
Right, totally.
But in this case, it goes up because they can see, oh, I'm using this over here. This is really important for me. So that's the easiest method. Other ways is teaching the relationships between numbers and teaching our students how to break things apart. Well, I can't do 8 times 7, but I could break 7 into 2 times 5, or 2 plus 5, sorry, 2 plus 5, and I can multiply 8 times 2 and 8 times 5 and then add them together. Our students love seeing that there's multiple ways to get to the answer, and in some ways they like that it's a little more convoluted and that they can find the way to get to it. And they love hearing that maybe some of the ways they had gotten to the answer in the past are valid and that it's okay, that it doesn't have to be this like rapid automatic response. And so those are some of the methods that I recommend. And so I'll share some pictures down below. But if you as a parent are overwhelmed by this, Debbie, starting on October 19th, we have a math fact class starting that's on multiplication. And we do narrowed sets of facts, and it's something that will run all year long. And your kids can just come in and have us teach it the right way. And then you get to practice it to automaticity at home.
Oh, that's very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like you answered several questions in that response.
Oh, good.
No, so that's super helpful. What about math refusal? Like kids who just kind of have just a block of, you know, around math for maybe because of failures they've had in the past or frustration.
Yep.
What strategy do you have for that?
What we do, because we do encounter that, the parents will bring the child and the child doesn't really want to be there, or the anxiety is so high they can't even hardly be in the room. We play games. They don't even know that they're necessarily doing a skill that we need them to do. It's so engaging that the students are having fun, they're laughing and giggling, and suddenly the anxiety goes down and now the new topics can start coming in. So that's what I would recommend, is just play as many games as you can think of that use the math skills that you're trying to learn. A popular one that we play is called Guess My Number. And while that may sound like maybe that's really low level and too simple, you could do this with an older student. So if you've got high school student that's struggling with variables and that kind of stuff, you could make a game board that has variables in it. And what it's allowing them to do is practice the language of math in a low stakes situation and get that practice in that they're needing. And you'll find that it bleeds over into the work that they're doing. And now oh yeah, X squared, I know what that looks like. I know what that means. That kind of stuff is really helpful. So we have a big game deck that we play from Bump. You could do an internet search, folks, for a game called Bump. That one's fantastic. Place Value Battleship is huge. Guess My Number. These kinds of games keep our students engaged. They're learning, and it lowers that anxiety and that refusal that they're feeling. But I also know that sometimes I've had students where it's like, I dare you to teach me. I am not going to laugh with you. I'm not going to have fun. And there's kids like that too. And so we'll try that, but sometimes having that hard conversation with not your parent, but maybe the person that's working with them, and say, like, you know, this isn't working. I can see you don't want to be here, and letting them out and off the hook surprisingly, I've had several students that they're even like, yes, out of here, I'm all done, da, da, da. Like they're so happy. But they come back to me later, future tense, and tell me thank you, because it was kind of their wake-up call that they had checked out of learning altogether. And a few of them even apologized, like, I'm sorry, I was such a punk, and I'm doing really good, you know? Especially when you've got those kids that are oppositional defiant. Sometimes it's like someone just saying, hey, I can see you're not invested in this, and this is a waste of time for both of us, and letting them out.
Right.
It's a little harder when you're a parent, because that just rubs you wrong, and they can see that for all it's worth. But yeah, try having some of those real conversations. But the games are really key in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's great to know. So I'm thinking also about the differently wired kids who, two different scenarios. One is that they have their own way of figuring things out and are really insistent on their own approach rather than what a textbook or a teacher might be trying to share. And then, yeah, so that's one piece. And then also we know that a lot of these kids do a lot in their head. And so could you touch upon those two things? What we should be caring about, and is that does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So kids that typically get in these patterns are very rigid thinkers. They do it the way they do it, and I shouldn't have to learn it your way. And so again, having some of those real conversations that math is a language, and we need to learn how to communicate in a way that more people can understand. Yes, your way is communicable, like you can communicate it. That's what I'm trying to say. You can communicate it, but it's difficult. Not everyone can relate to the way you're explaining it. So if you can learn this other way too, you can communicate what some of those things are. And so it's talking about that form of language. I worked with a really rigid thinker once who was obsessed with being a pilot when he grew up. And he loved to do everything up here, didn't want to do anything on the paper. And I knew he wanted to be a pilot, so I reached out to my brother-in-laws who are both pilots, and I said, give me real world scenario where math is important as a pilot. And one of them replied back and he said, well, when you're a co-pilot, you have to do all of the load calculations, and you cannot use a calculator and say, here's the number, or do it in your head and say, here's the number. You have to write it out line by line, how you got to this calculation, and you hand it to your captain. He verifies the math, and then you take off, because what happens if your loads are incorrect? You're burning too much fuel, you could have issues during the flight. There's a lot at stake. And once I explained that to him, he was like, oh, I see that has purpose. That's meaningful to me. So again, like trying to find that buy-in. What are they interested in? How does it apply to the real life? And anytime he was tempted to not show me the work, I would say something like, but I'm your captain and you're the co-pilot. I need to be able to see what you're saying. And that was really pivotal for him. Painstaking, yes. There was a lot of like when he was writing,
Right. Yeah.
but it was helpful to get that buy-in. And so for our students that don't like to show, the other thing you can do too, let me get a piece of paper. When you're teaching them how to show their work, it can help if they're writing out the steps. So if we've got 12 plus 7 here, okay, and this is such a simple thing, and it's backwards. I don't like that. But that's okay. 12 plus 7. And the next step, we're showing that we're going to break up the numbers. Maybe we're going to break it up into 10 plus 2 plus 7, something like that. Teaching them that they can draw a line in between each step can also help them solidify, like, okay, I showed this step, I showed this step. That line is also a nice sensory input. I don't care if they write it really hard because they're mad at me because I'm making them write the steps. But it's important too to have this conversation, like you will reach a point in math where the math is so complex, you can't hold it all up here. And I need you to rely on this procedure so that you can keep the math straight, so that you can show another person this pattern that you've found and discovered so they understand. It's really important for that. And you have to, I find you're always having to say it over and over. This is important. The math is going to change. You won't be able to see unless we're doing this. Because, you know, a lot of them are so smart, they can see the answer, especially with like the beginnings of Algebra 1, they can see the answer. Algebra 2 comes along, rocks their world because they can't hold it all up here. They can't see the relationships as well, and they don't have the skills anymore to be able to show what they know.
Right. That makes total sense. So I want to talk, first of all, we're going to wrap up shortly. So if you have a question, you can post it in this thread where this live feed is actually. But I want to ask one more question for you, and that is, I guess I want you to give hope to parents. So for parents who have littles, who have younger kids, elementary school, early middle school, and who are really struggling with refusal and math anxiety and or sloppy work, or, you know, still wanting to do it in their head and all that kind of stuff. Tell us kind of what it can look like, you know, if we give them the support that they need. Do they kind of eventually get there? In your experience, these kids have the potential to kind of get there?
Yes, there's so much hope to be had. Let me tell you about a story of a student, and I love him to pieces because I don't work with him anymore, but he still texts me and talks to me because we have such a fun relationship. But so he came to us 7th grade. That's technically his grade, but he was 8th grade in age because he got held back. And when he came to me, he was performing at a 3rd grade level. So that's really far behind. And his parents were very worried about him. His dyslexia, ADHD made it difficult to teach him math. And his mom was using Math-U-See to teach him, but she just felt like, I can't seem to get it in there. He's not retrieving it. He's not, you know, doing all the things he needs to. So he came over and started working with us, and we did higher frequency, so 4 times a week, which if this is the kind of results you'd like to see, it's the repetition that makes or breaks the experience. So working on it every day is really important. But 4 days a week, he would come and we would work together for an hour. And in 9 months' time, he went from 3rd grade all the way up to 7th grade level in math. And even though technically he should have been higher, that is significant growth. And then we continued to work the next 6 months with him and got him a little bit higher. And then his mom and him decided to put him back into public school because he was being homeschooled at the time. And we weren't sure. We thought surely the school will test him and put him in the right class. They did not. They dropped him in Algebra 1, much to my horror. And his other new teacher that he was working with, we were all horrified and extremely worried. But here's the good news. Because of the way we taught him, and because of the hands-on and the high repetition and plugging holes, if we just continue to work at grade level stuff and never address what happened in the past, they will continue to struggle. But we plugged in holes. He had such a good foundation, and he is acing his math classes. He's rocking math because he had that strong, solid foundation. So it is possible when you get the right combination of an approach, of the right teacher. Sometimes maybe that's not you, honestly, or maybe it's not who they're working with at school, but you find the right combination. These kids can really flourish, and he's doing super well in all of his other classes. The fun thing is the results don't take too long. We had some students come in recently who hated math. They didn't want to be there. All sorts of anxiety. We just played games for about a month. And then suddenly these kids are like loving math. They're excited and proudly announcing at the dinner table that they're going to be a mathematician when they grow up. So it can happen. But you have to shelf your expectation that they're going to perform at this grade level come hell or high water. Okay?
Yeah.
sometimes we deal with parents like that. And we have to have that conversation. Like, we're not going to get to grade level right now. Right now, we're plugging holes, and that's important work to do because math is developmental and sequential. If we don't take the time to fill in these holes, we're just building a boat with holes and giving your kid a bucket with holes. So that's not going to work. So that's important. And so my hopeful thing for you, or what you could do to hang on, is just play those games, remove your expectations. Your kids can sense you may have a high expectation for math and what it looks like and how it should be. Try to remove that, try to delete that expectation, and just play with your kids, do the math, cook more with them, bake more with them, because the math is there and they'll start seeing a purpose for it. And if you'll just buy into that, I promise it will work out. It really will. And I think there's a lot of parents too that worry, like they have a high schooler that's really struggling. It is never too late. Don't stop. Don't give up. We can help you with this. We get kids who come in all the time, 9th grade, performing at 1st grade level. It happens. There's still progress to be made. There's still things we can do. They're going to be okay. And I know that these methods work. So if you're listening and you want to help your child, like, get this book. This is helpful. Helps you explain why some of the issues are there and what you can do about them. And then I'll drop a few other links to parents that are interested in that have games in them, that have methods they can try that will help them hang on and just give their kids what they need right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, baking and cooking for many years when we were living abroad, there were a lot of translating recipes from the imperial to the metric system. There was so much math involved, and that was always good, but it was worth it because we had baked goods at the end of the day. But yeah, I think making it relevant is such a good reminder. And just before we say goodbye, just tell people again where they can connect with you and learn more about your resources.
Sure. So the best place to connect with us is over at math.com. Every Tuesday, we publish a video that shows a multisensory way math of teaching a concept. So be sure to check those out. They're free. They're on YouTube and Facebook. If you follow me on Instagram, I post a link to those as well. And then we've got, you can come over and get help one-to-one in group classes, mini-week classes, multi-week ones that are short-term commitment that work on a specific topic. There's lots of ways to get help, and we're building a resource page that will have all these kinds of things that we're talking about that you can go check out too and learn more yourself. So I look forward to connecting with all of you over there. And if you have more questions, drop them in the comments below and I will hang out and answer as many as I can.
Awesome. Adrianne, thank you so much. This has been very insightful. And it's just, you were on my podcast a couple of years ago talking about this. And even just personally, it's so interesting to see what's been happening in my home with my child. And we're in such a different place in math. And it's just fascinating. So anyway, I really appreciate you sharing so many good tips with us today. And thanks for your patience with our tech challenges in the beginning. And so we'll share some links here. There's another thread just so you know where I had said post questions. So check that one out as well.
I'll do that.
All right. Have a great day. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks.
Bye.